Eugen Sandow Strength and How to Obtain It. Preface to this electronic edition. Various versions of this book float around on the internet, but most, if not all, suffer severely from electronic transfer, making whole passages illegible, missing pictures and tables, or simply consisting of scanned pages that can't be read on e-readers. I therefore took the time to acquire a copy of the book, scan the text, correct it by hand, use images from the electronic edition found at top and library.org where needed, and include the tables and pictures in the appropriate places. In other words, I generally tried to keep everything as true to the original form as possible. One caveat still exists, like many of the physical editions of Strength and How to Obtain It currently being for sale. Mine too missed the anatomical chart Sandow talks about, and I also wasn't able to find it elsewhere, but without it the book is useless as a training guide. However, Sandow used 17-18 exercises that pretty much stayed the same over his several books, and to still give the reader of this e-edition a way of using it for some possible practical application as well. I therefore adapted the descriptions of the exercises from his earlier book, Sandow on Physical Training. You can find them in Appendix I. If someone is able to enlighten me about exercise number 18 or has the actual anatomical chart and is willing to let me have a look, I would be very grateful. Should you choose to adapt his style of training, keep in mind that not everything he assumes about how training works is necessarily how it should still be done. After all, more than 100 years have passed since the book was first published, and we did make some advantages in researching strength training in that regard. And when I said above that I tried to stay as true as possible to the original book, this also includes some forms of spelling, dumbbell instead of dumbbell, for example, but especially that I didn't alter any of the expressed worldviews that we today might find unacceptable. It too is questionable if everything Sandow reports on in the second part of the book took place as described. Likely some Victorian exaggeration was freely incorporated here. In Appendix I included a short article about Sandow I wrote for my site, containing some biographical background about him that you may find interesting. For now I will be finishing my work on this, as I find myself increasingly tempted to write English as used in the 19th century. Enjoy. EC of Evilcibacom, December 2012. Introduction. Hundreds of letters reach me daily, asking can I become strong? Yes, you can all become strong if you have the will and use it in the right direction. But, in the first place, you must learn to exercise your mind. This first of all lessons in physical training is of the utmost importance, for on it the whole of my system depends. If physical exercise alone and unaided could achieve the desired end, then would everyone who, like the breaker of stones, has to use his muscles to earn his daily bread, become, in a popular acceptation of the term, a strong man. The breaker of stones, however, never uses his mind. He has to get through a given amount of work, and his method is purely mechanical. Though he may use his muscles in hard work every day of the year, it is unlikely that his strength will ever materially increase. Exercise, indeed, without using the mind in conjunction with it, is of no use. It is the brain which develops the muscles. Physical exercise must be commenced by degrees, first bringing into play one muscle, then two, then three, and so on, being careful all the time to put the mind into every movement. Let me strongly advise every student to study well the anatomical chart which is published with this book. By its aid you will be able not only to receive a useful lesson in anatomy, but you will also be able to see at a glance the exercise by which each muscle may be developed. Part I, My System of Physical Culture 10 Strength and How to Obtain It. Chapter I, How to Exercise. In commencing the system of exercises, described and illustrated by the anatomical chart, there are certain questions which every student naturally asks himself. Probably the very first of these questions is, what part of the day ought I to devote to these exercises? The answer to this question must depend on the pupil himself, on his leisure and on his inclination. Some persons find the early morning the best and most convenient time, others prefer the afternoon, and a third class, again, find that they feel best and have the most leisure at night. I do not, therefore, lay down a hard and fast rule of time. The golden rule is to select such part of the day as suits you best, always avoiding exercise immediately after meals. If possible, let 2 hours elapse between a meal and exercise. Moreover, do not exercise just before going to bed if you find it has a tendency to keep you awake. Many of my pupils find that they sleep much better after exercise, but there are some upon whom it has a reverse effect. 11. If all hours are equally convenient to the pupil, the very best time for training under my system is the early morning. Stripped to the waist, in the privacy of his own room, the pupil will find that he can go through the whole course of exercises in from 20 minutes to half an hour. It is desirable to exercise before a looking glass, for you can thus follow the movements of the various muscles, and to see the muscles at work, and to mark their steady development, is itself a help and a pleasure. If the pupil is at all weak in the legs, he may, in performing the exercises, bend the knees slightly, or he may bend them one day and stand erect another. If possible, it is better of course to stand erect. In any case, he must be able to stand erect before completing the course. What I wish to impress on delicate pupils is the desirability of progress by degrees. Many men before beginning my system of physical training have been so weak that doctors have thought little of the prospect of saving their eyes, yet today they are amongst the strongest. They have progressed gradually, always being careful not to undertake too much, and thus adapting the exercises to their own individual requirements. It may be mentioned also that the old as well as the young may derive great benefits from my system, though all who are over the age of 50 should moderate the exercises on the lines suggested in the table of ages for pupils between 15 and 17. My exercises will also be found of considerable benefit to persons who suffer from obesity. Pupils must not be discouraged because, after the first few days' training, they may feel stiff. It sometimes happens that a young man or woman, or perhaps a middle-aged one, sets out on the course of training with the greatest enthusiasm. After the first 2 or 3 days the enthusiasm perhaps wears off, then comes a period of stiffness, and the pupil is inclined to think that he cannot be bothered to proceed with the course. To such 12 pupils, I would say, in all earnestness, don't be overcome by apparent difficulties. If you wish to succeed, go forward, never draw back. This stiffness, moreover, becomes a very pleasant feeling. You soon grow to like it. Personally, indeed, it might be said that it is one of the most agreeable sensations I have ever had. Frequently pupils ask me how long it should take them to get strong. The answer again depends on themselves, not only on their physical constitution, but also on the amount of willpower they put into their exercises. As I have said already, it is the brain that develops the muscles. Brain will do as much as dumbbells, even more. For example, when you are sitting down reading, practice contracting your muscles. Do this every time you are sitting down leisurely, and by contracting them harder and harder each time, you will find that it will have the same effect as the use of dumbbells or any more vigorous form of exercise. For the beginner, the most difficult part of my system is so fully to concentrate his mind on his muscles as to get them absolutely under control. It will be found, however, that this control comes by degrees. The brain sends a message to the muscles, the nerves receive it and pass it on to them. With regard to the willpower that is exerted, it should be remembered that whilst the effect of weightlifting is to contract the muscles, the same effect is produced by merely contracting the muscles without lifting the weight. It will be noticed that throughout my exercises I make a point of alternate movements. By this means one arm, or, as the case may be, one set of muscles, is given a momentary rest whilst the other is in motion, and thus freer circulation is gained than by performing the movements simultaneously. Another question which pupils are constantly asking me is whether it is right for them to perspire after the exercises. The 13 answer to this question is that it depends on the constitution of the pupil. If you perspire, it does you good. If you do not, it shows that your condition is sound already. Of course, it will be understood that I am answering in this, as in other questions, for general cases. There are always exceptions. Again, what, it is asked, are the general benefits of the Sandow system of physical training? The benefits are not, of course, confined to the visible muscular development. The inner organs of the body also share them. The liver and kidneys are kept in good order, the heart and nerves are strengthened, the brain and energy are braced up. The body, in fact, like a child, wants to be educated, and only through a series of exercises can this education be given. By it say the whole body is developed, and pupils who have followed my system testify not only to their increased muscular strength but to their general health. They feel, indeed, as strong as they look. 14 Chapter II, The Secret of the Cold Bath. If the pupil is able to exercise the first thing every morning, let me advise him, whilst the body is hot with a physical performance, to take a cold bath. It does not matter how much he may be perspiring, the cold bath will prove exceedingly beneficial. He must be careful, however, not to take his bath if he is out of breath. The exercises will, no doubt, quicken the heart's action, but in from 3 to 5 minutes after the series is completed the heart should be beating normally again. For persons who suffer from weak heart I would not advise a cold bath. As a general rule there is no need to ask the question, Is my heart weak? For if it is weak, you should know it beyond a doubt. After every little exertion, though the assertion may appear paradoxical, you will feel it beating in your head. In advising cold baths I speak, of course, for persons in the enjoyment of ordinary health. The bath should be begun in the summer and continued every morning throughout the year. In the winter, if the room is cold, light the gas and close the door. If your hair is not injuriously affected by cold water, and in many cases, I believe, cold water will be found to strengthen it, begin, as you stand over the bath, by splashing the water 5 and 20 times over your head. Next, whilst still standing over the bath, splash the water 15 times against the chest and 10 times against the heart. Then jump into the bath, going right down under the water. In the summer you may remain in the water from 10 to 15 seconds, but in the winter let it be just a jump in and out again. The subsequent rub down with towels is popularly supposed to produce half the benefits that result from a cold bath. I have no hesitation in saying that this is a great mistake. Let me explain the reason. As you get out of the bath you rub down first one part of the body and then the other, and thus whilst the one part 15 is being warmed by the friction, the other is getting cold. Many people who take cold baths in this way complain of touches of rheumatism, and the whole trouble arises, I believe, from different parts of the body being alternately warmed and chilled. In order to overcome the risk of this ill effect, my advice is this: do not spend any time over rubbing yourself down. If you do not like the idea of getting into your clothes wet, just take the water off the body as quickly as you possibly can with a dry towel, jump into your clothes, and let nature restore your circulation in her own way. You will get quite as warm by this method as by vigorously rubbing down, with the added advantage that the heat of the body will be more evenly distributed. If, owing to poor health or other exceptional causes, the circulation is not fully and promptly restored, walk briskly up and down the room. If you should still feel cold in any part of the body, probably the bath is not suited to your constitution, and in that case it is not advised. In 99 cases out of 100, however, the cold bath, taken as I have described, will have nothing but the most beneficial effects, and, if taken every morning throughout the year, it is the surest preventive that I know against catching cold. On the other hand, irregularity is liable to produce cold. In short, having once begun the cold bath, make a rule, summer and winter, never to leave it off. Personally, I find the very best form of the cold bath is to get into your clothes after it without drying the body at all. For the first moment or two the sensation may not be perfectly agreeable, but afterwards you feel better and warmer for adopting this method. The damp is carried away through the clothes and no particle of wet is left. For pupils who have not the convenience of a bathroom, a cold sponging down may be recommended as a substitute. In this case let 2 towels be taken and soaked with water. Rub the 16 front of the body down with one, and the back with the other. This method prevents the towel from absorbing the heat from the body, and the cold sponging is thus distributed evenly over its surface. Afterwards dry the body quickly as before, letting no time be lost in getting into your clothes. 17 Chapter III, the Tables of Ages. From the following tables pupils of all ages will be able to see at a glance how many times the movements of each exercise illustrated by the anatomical chart should be practiced daily. In the first place, parents who desire to see their little ones grow into well-developed men and women may be advised to buy their babies light wooden dumbbells as playthings. The exercises themselves, of course, should not be attempted until the child has reached the age of 6 or 7. From that age onwards be guided in the amount of daily practice by the tables. In order that every reader may understand the exercises easily, the leading muscles only are mentioned on the chart. Pupils should guard against overexertion, and, above all things, do not exercise violently. Keep time with each movement, and it will be found convenient to let each arm, not both arms, move once in a second. Thus, for example, the time of 10 movements with each arm of the first exercise would be 20 seconds. As a general rule, this time will be found to give just the exercise that is needed. Faster movements are not recommended for either young or old. Be careful also not to jerk the movements. Exercise easily and gracefully. 18 Table 1. For children of both sexes, between the ages of 7 and 10, using 1-pound dumbbells only. No of exercise. See chart. No of movements with each arm. Increase of movements, not to exceed 120. For children of both sexes, between the ages of 10 and 12, using 2-pound dumbbells only. No of exercise. See chart. No of movements with each arm. For children of both sexes, between the ages of 12 and 15, using 3-pound dumbbells only. No of exercise. No of movements. Increase of movements. For girls, between the ages of 15 and 17, using 3-pound dumbbells only, no of exercise, no of movements. For boys, between the ages of 15 and 17, using at first 4-pound dumbbells. At this age, boys, when they have increased the number of movements of the first exercise from 30 to 120, and all others in proportion, are recommended to go through the course again with 6-pound dumbbells, no of exercise, no of movements. Table 6, for girls, of 17 years of age and upwards, using 4-pound dumbbells only, no of exercise, no of movements. Increase of movements, for youths, of 17 years of age and upwards, using at first 5-pound dumbbells, as recommended in Table 5. Pupils, when they have increased the number of movements of the first exercise from 30 to 120, and all others in proportion, are recommended to go through the course again and again, adding 2 pounds to the weight of the dumbbells at the beginning of each fresh course. On the completion of the 7th and 8th course, with the dumbbells weighing 20 pounds, I guarantee that my pupils will be as muscular as I am. Chapter IV, Prizes for Pupils. In order to encourage those who intend to adopt my system of training, I offer for every down 2 sets of first, second and third prizes, in the form of cups and medals, to the pupils who can show in the one case the best development, and in the other the greatest strength. It will be possible, of course, for one pupil to win a prize in each division. Pupils who wish to compete for these prizes should send me, without delay, their present measurements, duly witnessed by 2 persons, one medical man preferred, together with their age, weight, height, and portrait, stripped to the waist. These measurements should be written legibly on one side of a sheet of paper, in order to facilitate their entry in my book of pupils' records. At the completion of their course of training, pupils will be required to fill up and address to me the subjoined table of measurements, together with a second portrait showing their development. It is important that the measurements should be again witnessed by at least 2 persons living in the same town as the pupil. There is no limit of time to the competitions. It is left to the discretion of pupils to return a table which they will find on the next page when they consider their development complete. Competitors may be guided as to the developments that are required by the letters from pupils that are published in subsequent pages. 29 Chapter V, Sandow's Chart of Measurements. The figure will show pupils how to take their own measurements. Medical man preferred. 32 Chapter VI, Sandow's School of Physical Culture. The reader of the second part of this book will see how my professional career was thrust upon me. It came through no seeking of my own. After my defeat of Samson, I accepted it partly because the offer seemed too good to be thrown away, and partly because they enabled me to gratify a wish to see something of the world. My ambition, however, was always to form and build up a system for the service of others rather than exhibit merely the results of that system in my own person. That ambition, I hope, is now to be realized, for I am founding a school of training for men, women, and children of both sexes, and in the course of time it is my desire to establish branches in every important town. The school will be conducted entirely on my own system of physical culture. Instruction will be given by specially qualified teachers, and every exercise will be lucidly described and clearly demonstrated. The pupils themselves will have an opportunity of developing their bodies to the highest extent, and from time to time I shall personally examine them. The instructors employed in the school will be specially trained for their work by me, so that the pupils will have the benefit of my best information and of thus learning the whole of my system exactly. In addition to the classes for men, women, and children, arrangements will be made for private lessons. My manager and representative will be my brother-in-law, M.R. Warwick Brooks, Jun., who is the best pupil I have ever had. For the past 6 years he has followed my system thoroughly, and the results have been remarkable. When I first met him he was exceedingly delicate. He could only walk with the aid of crutches. Gradually, however, he began to improve, and under my personal supervision, by the help of my system, his 33 strength so increased that today he is like a new man. By the aid of this school and its branches it is hoped that something will be done substantially to aid the physical development of this and succeeding generations. Letters from past pupils testify to the great benefits which can be derived from careful training under my system, and if the training has the further advantage of individual instruction those benefits should be increased even more than by studying this book. It is a pleasant ambition to hope by one's efforts to leave the world just a little better here and there than one found it. That ambition my pupils themselves will now be able to help me to realize. 34 Chapter VI, The Sandow-Whiteley Improved Exerciser. The Sandow-Whiteley Improved Exerciser, of which a sketch is published, is advised for pupils in addition to dumbbells. It can be fixed without trouble in any room, and it not only develops the muscles, but makes them flexible and supple. I have myself used the exerciser for many years, and it may be said that it is one of the secrets of my increasing strength. It has been a great help to me in keeping my muscles in perfect condition, and, moreover, I have found it exceedingly convenient to take about with me, being much lighter than dumbbells. Not only men and women, but children, can use this exerciser with advantage. When it was introduced to my notice about 4 years ago, I showed Professor Whiteloy's representative a similar exerciser of my own. He was naturally interested in it, and in the present Sandow Whiteley improved exerciser the best points of that two are carefully combined, special attention having been given to the rubber, webbing, and pullers, with a view of making them as near perfection as possible. This exerciser is in itself sufficient for ordinary exercises, and if dumbbells are used on alternate days the advantage to the pupil will be considerable. Accompanying every exerciser is a chart, which will show the pupil the movements for developing the different muscles. In a previous book I referred to the desirableness of using in certain exercises a leg machine to bring the muscles of the legs into play. The Sandow Whiteley exerciser may be used in place of that machine. Being somewhat cheaper, as well as lighter, the pupil will find it more convenient. Applications for the exerciser may be made to my School of Physical Culture, Street, James's Street, Piccadilly, London, W. The prices are as follows. Supplement Sandow's Combined Developer. Since this book has been in the hands of the publishers I have introduced a rubber developer far superior to any yet invented. After considerable experience and exhaustive experiments with rubber machines, I have succeeded in inventing one which allows of a combination of dumbbells and rubber exercises. Exclusive rubber exercise has not the effect of producing hard, firm, and supple muscles, therefore I have patented the detachable handles, which are simplicity itself. This developer can be so regulated as to prove equally beneficial to a weak man as to myself. From an economic point of view it stands alone, as at a small outlay, a developer can be purchased which is sufficient for a whole family. The detachable rubbers and handles allow of the machine to be fixed up to any weight, so that as one becomes stronger, one has ample scope for gradually increasing one's strength. With the ordinary rubber exerciser, it proves beneficial until one is becoming strong, and then it is not sufficient to carry you beyond a certain point, which necessitates another outlay in purchasing a heavier machine. The principle of my developer is to obviate this, as it can be regulated up to any strength. The machine is simply made and easily fixed, causing no damage to the door or wall to which it is attached. There being no pullers, no oiling is required, and there is no friction, 37 thereby causing the covering of the cords to wear out, thus making it more durable. And with fair usage I warrant each developer for 3 years 38 specification, made of best para rubber, with an improved system of webbing, giving it perfect elasticity, plated steel fittings, price complete, packed in box containing developer, nickel-plated dumbbells and photographic chart, 12/6, extra rubbers, 3%, Sandow pattern dumbbells, specially nickeled, turned, and stamped, 6 deeper lb, Sandow Schools of Physical Culture. New branch about to be opened, at a popular price. For particulars apply to Warwick Brooks, June, Manager Head Depot, 32, Street, Jamis Street, SW39. The Sandow Whiteley Improved Exerciser and Use 40 Chapter VIE, Heavyweight Lifting. It is not my purpose in this book to give anything beyond general directions for lifting heavy weights. You can become thoroughly strong and enjoy perfect health by means of the series of exercises already described. Heavyweight lifting requires personal instruction. That instruction will be given to those who may desire it at my school of training. Under qualified instructors it may be pursued without the risk of danger. Generally, however, it may be observed that to lift heavy weights it is desirable first to see what weight can be used without undue strain. Slowly raise this weight from your shoulder over your head, or, if from the ground, raise it somewhat more quickly. See how many times you are able to raise the weight first selected, and when you can perform the exercise with comparative ease raising it, say, 10 times, increase the weight for the next day's exercise by 5 pounds. Continue this increase day by day, remembering always to bring the left hand into play as well as the right. There are many other more specific directions, but they depend so much on individual requirements that it is not wise to put the rules on paper. Each pupil must be personally instructed. 41 Chapter IX, Nutritive Qualities of Foods. In the forum some time ago a table was prepared by Professor W. O. at water to show the amount of protein and energy obtained for 25 cents in New York and food materials at different prices per pound. Although this table is not prepared for English readers, it is, I think, sufficiently clear to illustrate the variations in the amount of nutritive material in different foods. Certainly the table is useful as a guide. Protein, grams, energy, calories, beef, sirloin, 25 cts 68,870 beef, sirloin, 20 cts. Letters from pupils. In the following pages will be found a selection from many thousands of letters which have been addressed to me by pupils who have already profited from my system of physical training. Donald M. Barton, Julius Schiller 87, Martinus Seaver King, Harvey C. Hodgins 88, another American pupil, Meredith C. Janvier, winner of the Sandow Gold Medal for State of Maryland, 89. Part II, Incidents of my professional career. 90. Sandow at the age of 10. 91. Incidents of my professional career. Chapter I, My childhood and boyhood. It is not necessary, some may think, to be born strong in order to become strong. Unlike the poet, who, we're told, has to be born a poet, the strong man can make himself. As a child, I was myself exceedingly delicate. More than once, indeed, my life was despaired of. Until I was in my 10th year I scarcely knew what strength was. Then it happened that I saw it in bronze and stone. My father took me with him to Italy, and in the art galleries of Rome and Florence I was struck with admiration for the finely developed forms of the sculptured figures of the athletes of old. I remember asking my father if people were as well developed in these modern times. He pointed out that they were not, and explained that these were the figures of men who lived when might was right, when men's own arms were their weapons, and often their lives depended upon their physical strength. Moreover, they knew nothing of the modern luxuries of civilization, and, besides their training and exercise, their muscles, in the ordinary course of daily life, were always being brought prominently into play. The memory of these muscular figures was ever present, and when we returned to my home in Königsberg I wanted to become strong like them. Though I used to try my strength and attend the gymnasium, nothing came of my desire for some years. Until I was 18 I remained delicate. At that age I began to study anatomy. It was thus I ascertained the best means of developing the body, and invented the system of 92, giving each individual muscle a movement, and of so arranging the form of the exercises that when some muscles are brought into play others are relaxed and left without strain. About 15 minutes every day was the average time devoted to special exercise at this period. It may be useful to remark that no particular form of diet was adopted. I ate and drank in the ordinary way. It may be said at once that I have no belief in special diet. There is no better guide to good living than moderation. Be moderate in all things, and you need fear no interruption in gaining strength by my system of training. 93-94. Chapter II, How I Came to London and Defeated Samson. The years of my life between 18 and 21 may be passed over with the remark that they saw a steady gain of strength and some occasional performances as an amateur athlete and wrestler. In 1889 I made the acquaintance of Aubrey Hunt, the artist, who was then at Venice. One of the most charming views in the neighborhood was to be gained from the grounds of my villa near Lido. Naturally M.R. Hunt wished to paint it, and it was a pleasure to be able to afford him the facility. One result of our acquaintance was that M.R. Hunt painted me in the character of a gladiator in the Colosseum at Rome. It was from M.R. Hunt that I learned that Samson was offering, at the Royal Aquarium in London, £100 to the person who could perform the feats of his pupil, Cyclops, and £1,000 to anyone who could beat his own. M.R. Hunt suggested that I should accept the challenge, and it was my original intention to come to London with him. It was decided, however, that I should start without delay, and the journey to England was made on the same day that I first heard of the challenge. Arriving in London at 6 o'clock in the evening, I went to M.R. Attila, a friend whom I had previously met at Brussels, to ask him to act as interpreter, for at the time I was unable to speak English. M.R. Attila not only promised his services, but gave me fresh hope by expressing his assurance that everything that Samson and his pupil could do I could accomplish easily. It was decided that the challenge should be accepted that night. With M.R. Albert Fleming to act as agent, we went at once to the aquarium. When Samson appeared on the stage he gave the usual challenge. Apparently to his surprise, M.R. Fleming 95 accepted it, asking him if he had the £100 at hand. Samson replied that there would be no difficulty about the money, but M.R. Fleming insisted on seeing it, and the note was accordingly produced. Samson was then asked if he had the An 1,000 ready, and he promised that it would be forthcoming in the event of the defeat of his pupil. The preliminary arrangements having been completed, and the note for £100 handed to Captain Molesworth, the manager of the aquarium, I walked up to the stage. Seeing me in evening dress, the audience were unable to realize that I stood the slightest chance of defeating the strong man and his pupil. They even shouted to Samson not to heed me, but to get on with his performance. It seemed evident to them that I was unequal to the task that had been undertaken, and Samson himself burst out laughing when he saw me. The coolness and indifference of this first reception in London were not, perhaps, unnatural, for in evening dress there was nothing, as everyone said at the time, specially remarkable about my appearance. But when I took off my coat, and the people could see the muscular development, the tone of indifference changed immediately to surprise and curiosity. Samson and Cyclops themselves shared the general astonishment, though they did not allow their surprise to be shown for more than a moment, Samson being heard to remark, "We will beat him, anyhow." The first feat which Cyclops performed was to lift over his head 2 weights of 56 pounds each, lowering them with arms fully extended. This performance I repeated. Cyclops next took the barbell, weighing 240 pounds, and with 2 hands lifted it from the ground over his head. When the audience saw that for the second time the same feat could be accomplished with ease, they began to cheer, and I repeated the performance, after Cyclops, using only 1 hand. All this time Samson, anxious of the issue, kept asking me in asides in French to let him know my history. As, however, he 96 did not or would not speak in German, he had to remain in ignorance. The performance proceeded, and now Cyclops took with 1 hand a dumbbell weighing 210 pounds, and, extending it at arm's length, bent down and raised over his head with the other a second dumbbell, of 0 pounds weight. When I repeated this feat, it was thought that the challenge had been won, for this was the end of the performance for which it was understood it was offered. M.R. Fleming, accordingly, asked for the £100, but Samson refused, saying that the whole performance would have to be repeated and continued until one of the 2 competitors gave in. Nothing less would satisfy him as to which of the 2 was the stronger. On this point the audience disagreed, and called on him to hand over the money. Appeal was made to Captain Molesworth, who, addressing the audience, promised to see fair play. He could not agree, he said, with M.R. Samson, that it was fair that the performance should be continued until one of them dropped from sheer exhaustion. But he suggested that Cyclops should introduce 2 fresh feats, and that if I could repeat them the money should be mine without further question. Although the audience still maintained that the challenge had been won, I expressed, through my interpreter, perfect willingness to perform not 2 only, but 20 more feats should Cyclops wish to try them. The first of the 2 extra feats was then taken. Cyclops lying on his back raised a weight of 240 pounds with 2 men sitting on it, and when the men jumped off he himself stood up, raising the weight with him. This performance I also repeated. Now came the final effort. At the side of the stage stood a great stone, weighing, I should think, about 500 pounds. On 97 this stone was secured the 2 56-pound weights. 2 chairs were brought, and Cyclops, standing on them in order to get a position above the stone and its weights, raised the whole load with his middle finger some 4 inches above the ground. When this performance had been repeated by me, Samson acknowledged that that part of the challenge relating to Cyclops had been won, and offered to hand over the £100. My interpreter explained that I had not come to London to win merely the £100. I had come for the greater sum, the £1,000, in fact, which had been offered to any person who should defeat Samson himself. Samson, who was clearly surprised at the issue, replied that he was not prepared to meet me that night, and though the public disapproved of the postponement, it was eventually decided with Captain Molesworth that the test should be made on the following Saturday evening. The eventful evening which was to decide the issue between us fell on the 2nd of November, 1889. Never, it was said, had the Royal Aquarium been so densely crowded. The people began to arrive as early as 2 o'clock in the afternoon. When I reached the building, in company with Captain Molesworth, M.R. Attila, and M.R. Fleming, 20 minutes before the hour announced for the challenge to be taken up, it was literally impossible to get through the crowd. Here, at the very outset, was a difficulty of a new and an unexpected character. What was to be done? To try to get through the enormous throng in 20 minutes was obviously hopeless. Willing as the crowd might be to let us pass, it was beyond their power to make way for us. We determined, therefore, to go to the stage door, and here a further difficulty presented itself. We could not gain admission, No one would. 98 opened the heavy door. The man behind had received the strictest orders, we could hear him saying, as we stood impatiently outside, to prevent anyone from entering. In vain did Captain Molesworth implore him to let us through. Explaining who we were, the man was obdurate. He said that he was very sorry, but he failed to recognize Captain Molesworth's voice, and he could not disobey explicit instructions. All the time the precious minutes were flying, and the hour when the challenge was to be met had actually arrived. It was, indeed, an anxious and a trying moment. We heard afterwards that when the hour of the challenge came and Samson saw that I was not there, he strutted up and down the stage, exclaiming, "I'll see, he does not come. I thought he would not meet me. I will give him 5 minutes, nay, 10 minutes more." He took out his watch. The minutes were speeding, and still Samson stood alone. Meanwhile, resolved not to be baffled by this absurd mischance, it was determined that, as fair words would not open the door, strength should smash it open. A blow well directed, and the door was burst from its hinges. The man inside was slightly injured by this rough method, but a £10 note served to solace his feelings and to heal his wounds, and we just managed to save the challenge by the space of half a minute. The Marquis of Queensberry and Lord D. Clifford were appointed judges, and they examined closely all the bars, bells, weights, and chains that were to be used in the performance. Samson first desired that I should follow him in some juggling feat with a water bottle, but the judges decided that this was not in the order of the performance. Only such tests of actual strength as Samson was in the habit of displaying could now be allowed. Samson, abiding by this decision, took a large iron bar and bent it over his calf, his arms, and his neck, just as, in a similar way, by striking it on the muscles of the arm, one may 99 bend a poker. The thing is little more than a trick. Of course, muscle is essential to its successful performance, for, if you have no muscle, you will hit the bone, with the danger of breaking it. Such a performance, although there is a certain knack in doing it gracefully and with ease, was not difficult to follow. Samson next took a wire cable, winding it round his chest, under his arms, and then breaking it. This feat, which is performed by inflating the lungs and at the same time contracting the muscles of the chest, I was also able to repeat. By the third item in the display it seemed that Samson desired to leave the issue of the challenge in doubt, for it consisted in snapping a chain which encircled his arm. This armlet, which fitted Samson well enough, was for me too small. Fortunately, I was prepared for the emergency. I had ascertained where the chain was bought, and had got the same firm to make me an armlet of exactly the same strength, of a size suitable to my larger development. When I produced it, Samson at first refused to be satisfied that it would be a fair test. A representative of the firm who made it stood up in the auditorium and assured the public that it was of the same strength as that of the chain made for Samson. The judges examined it, together with a paper which testified to the equality of strength, and decided that the test would be perfectly fair and that the performance was to continue. I placed the chain on my arm and broke it. Samson was still dissatisfied, and I made the offer that if either he or his pupil, Cyclops, could repeat my performance with a dumbbell which I had at hand, we would declare the result a draw, and he could keep his £1,000. The dumbbell, which was then brought onto the stage, weighed 280 pounds. With one hand I lifted it up, then lay down, and finally stood up with it. After that feat I took another dumbbell, weighing about 220 pounds. With two hands I raised it to my chest, fastened some chains around my arms, and burst them asunder before releasing it. 100 I have had enough of this, now, exclaimed Samson. It's all humbug. I don't call this fair play at all. The judges, however, were sufficiently satisfied, and M.R. Fleming asked for the £1,000. The reply was that it should be paid in the morning, but it remains to be added that I never received that £1,000. It was stated that Samson had taken his money away, and in the end I agreed to accept £350 from the management of the aquarium in settlement of the challenge. When we left the aquarium after the contest the great crowd followed us cheering, and the four-wheeled cab into which we got was lifted up by these enthusiasts. The crowd cheered us all the way to my rooms in Leicester Square. Newspaper men poured in to interview me, and, though I had then no intention of giving performances in public, I was induced to accept one of numerous offers of £150 a week, made by a syndicate of the members of the Lyric Club, and I commenced an engagement at the Alhambra, giving M.R. Attila £30 a week to assist me. I spent 3 months at the Alhambra and 3 months in the provinces, and entered into engagements for some years to come. The reader will probably ask if special means were adopted during this and succeeding engagements to maintain my strength. The answer is very simple. The performance itself provides the necessary amount of daily training. I eat, drink, smoke and sleep quite in the ordinary way, taking care to observe in all things that guiding rule of moderation to which reference is made in the preceding chapter. I only practice, in order that grace and perfection may be attained, when some new feat is introduced. Personally, it may be added, I find that the best time for a performance is about 3 hours after a meal. 101-102 Chapter I meet Goliath. At the end of my first engagement in London and the provinces, I went to Germany for a holiday. Driving out one day at Aachen, I met a veritable giant. He was a quarryman, and he was engaged in loading stones. So huge and extraordinary was his appearance that my horse positively shied at him. Imagine, if you can, this tremendous fellow, his head as huge and grotesque as that of any pantomime mask, with a nose the size of an ordinary fist. As for his own fist, it would have made more than 3 of mine. And when a 5-shilling piece was placed beneath the ball of his finger, believe me, it was impossible to see it. So large were his boots that not only could I get both my feet into one, but I could turn entirely round inside. And yet, strangely enough, despite his immense limbs and body, he was not a particularly tall man. A little more than 6 feet, 6 feet 2 dual inches, in fact, was his height. His chest measurement was about 80 inches and his weight 400 pounds. He was not a fat man in proportion to his size, quite the contrary, he was bony and muscular. The thought occurred to me as soon as I saw him that to give him a part in a performance as a modern Goliath would be, from a popular point of view, eminently attractive. I asked him what wages he was earning. 5 marks a day, he replied. It appeared that he was given nearly double the pay of an ordinary laborer because he could lift heavier weights and load the carts more quickly. I told him that if he liked to accept an engagement with me I would give him 20 marks a day, whether he worked or not. A German mark, as everyone knows, is equivalent to an English shilling. The giant quarryman could scarcely credit such good fortune, and eventually it was agreed that he should come to my house to talk the proposal over, and have his strength tested. When he 103 came, it was found that he could do nothing more than lift heavy weights from the floor. He had never put himself into training, and his exceptional proportions, which, under different circumstances, might have been turned to good account, were of no special use to him. However, it was settled that he should come with me, and I brought him to England. Well do I remember our arrival at Charing Cross. The huge size of Goliath, whose real name, by the way, was Carl Westphal, attracted the most pronounced attention. It was impossible to think of taking a cab, for no cab would have held him, even if he had been able to get inside it. There was, therefore, nothing for it but to walk to my chambers, which were then in Rupert Street, Piccadilly. Thousands of people followed us the whole way, and Rupert Street was blocked. A giant, when you have got him, is rather like a white elephant. He is a rare creature, but it is difficult to know what to do with him. It would have been clearly unwise to let him go into the streets, and accordingly he had to be kept indoors. For 7 or 8 weeks I tried to train him, but he proved an idle fellow, and it became evident that nothing much could be done with him. I had an engagement at the time at the Royal Music Hall, and a performance was arranged in which Goliath had to surprise me, lumbering after me across the stage, and trying to hold me in his grip. We wrestled together, and it was his business to make himself the victor. Then, in order to finish me, he took a cannon, weighing 400 pounds, and placed it on his broad shoulders, prepared to fire. In a moment or so I returned with the clubs. It was now the turn of the giant to show alarm, and gradually he had to retire, with the cannon still on his back, into a frame of refuge. I at once climbed to the top, and getting into a position above my antagonist, I lifted him, his refuge, and his cannon, with one finger, a few inches off the ground. During this part 104 of the performance we fired the cannon, and the whole display was brought to a conclusion by placing my arm through a leathern belt which girt his waist, and carrying him at arm's length off the stage. What became of him after he left me I never heard. The last report was that he had carried off his own landlady, and that the two had started some sort of show together. 105-106 Chapter IV. A presentation under curious circumstances. After my engagement at the Royal came a holiday in Paris. It was there I met a very dear school friend, whom I had not seen since I was about 10 years of age. My friend's father was at this time German ambassador at Paris, The incident which followed our meeting will be better explained by prefacing the story with the statement that as boys we were great billiard players. We were continually playing at each other's houses, and, though we were such mere lads, we could even beat tough others at the game. Nothing, therefore, was more natural than that, when we met, my friend should ask me if I was still a good player. As a matter of fact I was not in practice, but that did not deter us from deciding to try our skill. So we went to a room which he selected, and started a game. He did not know then that I had made my strength a profession. He was rather under the impression that I had followed my father's desire and studied medicine. However, the game began, and, as we talked a good deal over old times and spoke in German and played rather slowly, I suppose we unconsciously annoyed a party of Frenchmen. At any rate they made unfriendly remarks, and before we had finished our game they marked on the slate that they had engaged the table. Wishing to play again, we were not disposed to give it up to people whose manner was obviously offensive. As our right to continue was disputed the attendant was called, and it was pointed out that, according to the regulations of the establishment, we were perfectly within our rights in playing a second game. So we played on, and whilst we were joking and laughing about old times they, it seems, thought we were making fun of their discomfiture. When the game was finished we ordered 2 steaks, which were served at a table behind the players. We were still laughing over old times when one of the party came up, saying 107 angrily, "I've had enough of your laughter, if you don't stop be sure I'll make you." I told him that I was very sorry that my mood offended him, and if one could not laugh at our own personal jokes I should be sorrier still. It was added that I did not wish to interfere with him, and it was suggested also that he should attend to his own game and leave us alone. It was evident that he wished to pick a quarrel, nor would hot words suffice him. Vowing that he must give me something to remember him by, he struck me across the face. Beneath this fresh insult I tried to remain quite calm, telling my assailant that it would be certainly better for him to take himself off and leave me alone. But at such times, when the temper is quick, good advice is not heeded. Moreover, he probably thought he had to deal with someone of poor spirit. Whatever may have been in his mind the facts are plain. Finding that I took one blow calmly he struck me another and called me coward. My friend, who had hitherto kept quiet, now attempted to interfere, but I held him down, nearly wrenching his wrist round. The force, which was exerted must have given him an idea of the strength that was ready to be used if it were needed, for looking first at his wrist and then at me, he exclaimed in English, "Why don't you knock the fellow down so you speak English?" Said the Frenchman, "Why don't you get up and fight me?" With these words he struck me fiercely on the nose. The blood streamed down my clothes, which were spoilt besides by the gravy that was splashed on them in the disturbance from the dishes. My appearance must have been deplorable, and as I was that morning wearing a new suit, I lost my patience with the man. Walking slowly towards him, and then with a quick grip of his neck and knees, I picked him up, knocked his head and knees together, and banged him down in 108 the center of the table. The table broke through, and he fell to the ground. You can imagine, I dare say, the scene of wreckage and consternation. The smashed table, the man dazed, lying in a heap on the floor, his friends around him open-mouthed with amazement. In the midst of this scene I sat down with my friend and smoked a cigar. A gendarme was fetched. He entered the room and wanted to arrest me. The proprietor caught hold of him, saying, "Be careful, he is an awful man, he will kill you, you must have some assistance." 4 more gendarmes were summoned, and, refusing to take me in a cab, they marched me along to the police station. Some of the friends of the man who was hurt accompanied us and explained to the authorities that the regrettable affair was not my fault. They were sorry at what had happened, and I was liberated on bail. Meanwhile they took their injured comrade to the hospital. He was still unconscious, and in that condition he remained a day and a half. Being sincerely sorry for the injury I had caused, I called at the hospital and asked to see him, but he refused. As soon as he recovered, which was not for some weeks, I left Paris to return to London to fulfill an engagement at the Tivoli. One night whilst I was performing there, the porter brought me a message asking if I would step up to see a gentleman and a party of friends in a private box. When I went up I seemed to recognize the face of the person who wished to see me, but I could not recall where I had seen it before. The party invited me to take wine with them, and nothing would satisfy them but my consent to be their guest at supper. When we reached the hotel, my host said, "I perceive, M.R. Sandow, you have only pretended that you know me. You do not really recall my identity." 109 It had to be confessed that he was right. "If you really knew me," he proceeded, "you would probably not speak to me, Why not, I asked. I speak to you because I seem to like you. Surely that is sufficient. We will see, he added. I have come a long way to see you. I have come from Paris. I am an amateur in your own line, performing feats of strength myself. Of all my friends I have the reputation of being the strongest. Having read of your performances in the French and English papers, I was determined to come to London to see you. I saw the whole program at the Tivoli tonight, waiting impatiently for your display. When you stepped onto the stage I nearly dropped to the ground. Why, I asked, growing curious. Tears stood in his eyes, as he exclaimed earnestly, will you promise to forgive me? Promise me the tour. I cannot tell you. I told him that I did not know what I had to forgive, but at any rate I promised to forgive him in advance. Well, he went on, if I had known you were Eugen Sandow I would never have struck you that blow in Paris. And then in enthusiastic French fashion he clung hold of me and kissed me on the cheek that he had previously smacked before all the people. Of course, why had I been so blind? This was my assailant of the French billiard room. All, however, was now forgiven and forgotten, and as a token of our good understanding he presented me with a handsome gold watch. Today we are the greatest friends, and whenever I go to Paris I stay with him. He 110 is a French count, but for obvious reasons, not the least being that he is my friend. Despite the hard knocks which came of our first meeting, it would not be fair here to disclose his name. 111-112 Chapter V, The Living Weights. About this time there were many strong men. Each hall in London could boast of at least one. It was also a great weight-lifting period. When I lifted my heaviest bell, 280 pounds, the other strong men put out a placard stating that they were lifting 300 pounds. By the time I had practiced sufficiently to raise the weights I was lifting from 280 pounds to 300 pounds. They came out with a statement that they were lifting 320 pounds, and so their little game went on. For my part I was determined to introduce a novelty. Henceforth, there should be actually living weights. I started, therefore, at the Tivoli with a new display, lifting a horse at arm's length above my head, and marching with it to musical accompaniment. This was followed by a display with human dumbbells, taking a long bar with a large ball at each end. I placed in each ball a man, and I raised bar, balls, and men, slowly over the head. After putting them down the balls opened and the men rolled out. This performance I accomplished in order to equal the feat of lifting 300 pounds dead weight. Further, I lifted and supported on my chest a grand pianoforte with an orchestra of 8 performers on top of the instrument. There was still a fourth feat which I performed, knowing that no one could equal it, and that was to turn a somersault whilst holding a weight of 561 bs in each hand. These performances are repeated in the provinces. During this tour I had the pleasure of visiting not only many of the chief cities of England, but also Edinburgh and Glasgow. Who can fail deeply to be impressed by the grandeur and magnificence 113 of the scenery of Scotland? Certainly I was not proof against it. No city that I have ever visited is more beautiful than Edinburgh, and the Scottish people themselves I found exceedingly kind and agreeable. It has not yet been my good fortune to visit Ireland, but I hope to go there, and I have no doubt that I shall find its people as warm-hearted as they're always represented. At the end of my first provincial tour I returned to London to fulfill an engagement at the Palace Theatre. Here I introduced another novelty. In place of the orchestra I held 3 horses on my chest. These animals stood on a plank, one at each side and the third in the center, holding the balance in a game of seesaw. Included in this performance was the feat in which a horse guardsman and his horse rode over me, thus completing at the time the chapter of living weights 114-115 Chapter VI. On the Elba, bound for New York, we come now to the year of the Chicago exhibition, when I entered into a contract for an engagement in America, with Messieurs Abbey, Scheffel, and Grau, an old friend and famous pianist, Martinus Sieverking, whom I knew years before in Belgium and Holland, accompanied me to the New World. Sieverking was a brilliant artist, but as a man he was exceedingly weak and delicate. He had no power of endurance, and it was difficult for him to remain at the piano long at a time. If I had only your strength, he used to say, I think I might become almost the greatest player in the world. I suggested that he should come with me as my guest to America, guaranteeing that in 9 months or a year, under my personal supervision and training, he would grow so strong that his best friends would scarcely recognize him. Agreeing to come, he traveled with me all through America. The result of my system and supervision was that his strength grew marvelously. Within the year, weak as he was the start, he became the strongest of all my pupils, and the most redoubtable amateur I have ever met. The portrait which is published on an earlier page will speak for itself when you remember that a year before it was taken the sitter was a gaunt, slim, delicate figure, with narrow chest, sloping shoulders, and no muscles at all. But this is anticipating. Let us revert for a moment to our departure from England. We sailed on the Elba, the vessel that was afterwards wrecked. There was a good deal of bustle in getting on board, and some curiosity, I suppose, amongst the 116 passengers, when they saw the sailors straining beneath the weight of my luggage and apparatus, that a strong man was to sail with them. With the captain and the first engineer I became very friendly, giving them each during the voyage lessons in my system. Somehow I used to feel that the ship we were on was a doomed vessel. I am not ordinarily superstitious, and it is not necessary to attempt to account for the feeling, but do what I would I could not shake off the dread impression that one day that ship would go down. I became so friendly with the engineer, whom I used to visit in his own cabin, that I advised him to give up his appointment and go to sea no more. But my advice was apparently impracticable, and at the end of the voyage we parted very good friends. Some time after that, whilst I was in America, the world was startled by the news of the Elba's disaster. My friend, the engineer, was amongst the few who were saved. He wrote me a letter telling me of the tidings. This letter touched me very deeply, and seeing that it contains a story of singular bravery, it may not be inappropriate if I introduce here so much of it as I remember. Having commented on the strange fulfillment of my prediction, he described how, when the boat was going down, the captain lashed himself to the bridge, saying he would never leave his ship. From the engineer's boat they called to him to come on, but he would not stir. Then they sent back the pilot, but still to no purpose. By the faint glimmer of a lantern he penciled a note which he asked might be sent, if the bearer should be saved, with his heart's love to his dear wife and children. For the last time the pilot left the ship, and as the boat bore away from its now fast sinking sides, the captain from the bridge, immovable from the post of duty, waved his long farewell. 117-118 Chapter VI. My first hour in America. First experiences are occasionally curious. You shall hear mine. Although the day we reached New York was the hottest that had ever been known in that great country of wonderful records, no heat, however extreme, could detract from the glories of New York Harbor, certainly the finest harbor I have ever seen. Numerous people, including, of course, the ubiquitous newspaper men, came on board to welcome me. Bands were playing, and there was a gay and busy time generally. Having landed, I entered a cab. Everyone, I suppose, has a vivid recollection of his first cab in America. The independence of the American cab driver is sublime. It is something too great for words. You can only draw a long breath and admire it. The particular journey which I was undertaking would have been in England something considerably less than a shilling fare. Hoping to be generous, I proffered the driver an equivalent in English money to 2 shillings. To my surprise he said, "I guess, Colonel, that's for myself. Your fare is $4, just 8 times as much as I had offered." Of course, I could not argue with the man. He knew better than I, and there was nothing for it but to pay promptly what he demanded. Moreover, in America, it must be remembered, they charge, not for the drive, but for the cab. Mr. Abbey, who met me on the boat, accompanied me to the hotel at which I was to stay. At the office his attention was called away for a moment, and I was left to the tender mercies of the bellboy, a nigger, who was asked to show me the rooms. "Come along, sir," the boy drawled, and along I went, making my first acquaintance with an American elevator, in which we 119 were shot up heavenwards. "How high we?" I asked, as we got out. "Oh, this is the 16th floor," replied the boy, in an offhand manner. "You can see if you look down." I did look down. By Jove, the depth down that staircase was tremendous. Having selected my apartments, the boy coolly stood beside me in my own room rolling a cigarette and lighting it in my presence. This action seemed a little impudent, but it was nothing to that which was to come. Remarking that I desired to wash, I also asked the boy if he would clean my boots. "Clean your boots?" he exclaimed, in blank astonishment. "We don't do that in America. We," speaking of course for himself and the niggers like him, "don't clean boots here." "Who then," I asked, "does clean them?" "Oh, you must go downstairs for that." And with these words he reclined on my sofa, rolled another cigarette, and calmly smiled at me. This was really too much for white flesh and blood to bear. I said to him sharply, "Look here, young man, I may be a stranger in this country and ignorant of some of its ways, but I know enough of Americans to be quite sure that it is not right for you to conduct yourself in this way. If you don't promptly clear off, I will report you." But the boy was not easily to be moved. Instead of taking himself off, he squared up and wanted to fight me, so I just took hold of that boy, and, testing his jacket and trousers to be sure that they would bear the strain, I swung him over the 16th floor staircase, and there for a few moments I held him, just to give him a view of the depth, which was so 120 tremendous. My word, didn't that boy shout and scream! I assured him that he was quite safe in my hands so long as it was closed, but if he ever attempted his impertinences again I would bring him to the same spot and open it, and I reminded him that to drop through 16 floors would not be good even for nigger boys who smoked cigarettes in private rooms and affected to be indignant at the suggestion that they should clean a visitor's boots. The boy's cries drew a small crowd, including my guest and pianist, Martinus Severking, and the manager of the hotel. The manager fully agreed with the warning I gave the boy, and was profuse in his apologies, saying that such conduct from a bellboy was unprecedented. 121-122 Chapter VIE, Incidents of the American Tour. A fortnight after my arrival in New York I commenced an engagement at the casino, and after each performance, whilst I was still stripped to the waist, I gave lectures on anatomy and my system of physical culture in my dressing room. These lectures were attended by many of the most notable people in America, the crowded audiences including several ladies. I demonstrated how each feat was accomplished, and let the people feel for themselves my muscles, to prove that whilst, when they were relaxed they were as soft as butter, when contracted they were as hard as steel. I repeated at the casino the performances that I had been giving at the Palace Theatre in London. As my engagement lengthened I grew constantly more acquainted with American people, whom, let it frankly be admitted, I liked immensely. They are wonderfully nice fellows, these Americans. The only fault that is to be found with them is that too generous length to which their hospitality is liable to go in the direction of cocktails. They like to give you a bath of cocktails, and if a bath should not suffice they would think nothing of making a river for you. For a moderate drinker like myself, their generosity is a little embarrassing. But as the point was emphasized that I could never have the assurance to say that I had been to America without tasting a cocktail, I at last yielded to their persuasions, and, judging from the samples of Manhattan, martini, and oyster, which I tried, I am bound to confess that these drinks are exceedingly nice, and that there is little to beat them. Another striking feature of life in America is to be found in the trotting horses. They are simply marvelous creatures, moving with ease and almost with the speed of a railway engine. From New York I went to Boston, where my system of 123 physical training became very fashionable, and after the Boston visit came Chicago, Mr. Severking always accompanying me. When I arrived at Chicago I went to the Trocadero, where I was to appear, and inquired for the manager. A tall slim fellow made his appearance in answer to the inquiry, and for some minutes a game of cross purposes ensued, for whilst I was not sure whether he really was the manager, he doubted whether I was the strong man whom he expected. At last, however, I ascertained that he was Mr. Ziegfeld, or at least Mr. Ziegfeld's son, and he was assured that I was Sandow. He showed me round the theatre, which was a tremendous place, with accommodation for fully 6,000 people. It had been originally an armory, and was used more for concerts than variety entertainments. Mr. Ziegfeld had taken it because his other theatre, 2 days before the opening of the exhibition, was burned down. At the time of my arrival it was proving too big, but, as good luck would have it, such was the popularity of my performances, the building, despite its huge size, was filled nightly. In the exhibition grounds one morning shortly after my arrival, Mr. Ziegfeld suggested that I should drive round in one of the hand wagons. "My dear fellow," I said, "it would never do for a strong man to be pushed round like that." "What would the people say?" "Oh, they don't know you yet," replied Mr. Ziegfeld. "You get in and try it." It was no use for me to chaff him by saying that these wagons were more adapted to idle fellows of his slim proportions, for inside he would have me get, who of all people in the world should come to push me round but an unfortunate hunchback. The result was that next morning the papers came out with 124 illustrations of the ludicrous scene, with the heading "The Strong Man Too Strong to Walk." At the termination of the World's Fair, Mr. Ziegfeld proposed that I should prolong my tour. Accepting his suggestion, and engaging him as my manager, he booked a tour for me, including all the principal cities. Throughout this tour I offered at each performance $10,000 to any person who could duplicate my feats of strength or even do anything that could be said reasonably to approach them. At St. Louis, one of the greatest beer brewing districts in the world, The challenge, I was informed, was to be accepted. The youth who was prepared to meet me explained that he was somewhat too stiff to accomplish all my feats, and I accordingly promised that if he could repeat one of them, that was to lift with one hand over his head my heaviest dumbbell weighing 300 pounds, I would consent to give him the money. When the time came for him to take up the challenge, he grew alarmed at the prospect. In answer to my manager's announcement from the stage that we were ready for him, and that the money had been duly deposited, he stood up in the auditorium to remark that the challenge was made only as an advertisement. He did not believe in it, and he refused to come to the stage. With these words he rushed out of the building. His friends, who had a good deal of faith in his physical powers, rushed after him, and succeeded in bringing him back. In order further to encourage his drooping spirits, my manager offered him the $10,000 if he would lift the weight over his head with both hands, but still he did not like to attempt the task he had before actually undertaken. We then reduced the conditions still further, promising that if he would lift the weight with two hands even as high as his shoulders we would still give him the money. His friends now chaffed and now rallied him, and at last he put his strength to the test. But lo, this vaunted strong man was a very weak man, for so far 125 from being able to raise the weight to his shoulders, he succeeded scarcely in moving it from the ground. 126-127 Chapter IX, My Lion Fight in San Francisco. Perhaps the greatest, certainly the most thrilling, of all my experiences is that which I am about to relate. It is the story of my lion fight in San Francisco. I was performing in that western city at the time of the Midwinter Fair, which followed the Chicago exhibition. In connection with this fair, Colonel Bone was exhibiting a great menagerie. One day he advertised a fight to the death between a lion and a bear. A tremendous tent, with accommodation for 20,000 people, was erected for the occasion. Thousands and thousands of persons had bought tickets, when the police issued an order forbidding the performance, and the proposed spectacle had to be abandoned. The thought occurred to me that I should take the bear's place and measure my strength against the king of the forests. Of course there is always between the unarmed man and the beast this disadvantage, that the beast has natural weapons in his teeth and claws, whilst a man has nothing to help him in the fight. This lion, moreover, was a particularly furious animal. Only a week before he made a meal of his keeper. I have met many lions in various places, and this beast was certainly the largest and finest of them all. I was fully prepared to meet him as he was, provided I could have an equivalent for his claws in a short dagger or some similar weapon. But the law in America, as in England, is rightly very stern against cruelty to animals, and the dagger, of course, could not be allowed. If I desired to meet the beast, the only way was to fight him as I would box a man, completely unarmed. As there is no law to prevent cruelty to men, there was no objection to this method, though Colonel Bone, as well as my own friends, insisted that if there was to be a fight it must be a struggle between brute strength and human strength. In short, mittens would have to be placed on 128 the lion's feet to prevent him from tearing me to pieces with his claws, and a muzzle would have to be placed over his head. Even with these precautions I was advised not to proceed with the contest. With his strength, said Colonel Bone, he'll knock your head off. But, personally, I had no fear. I was only anxious for the contest to begin. The engagement was accordingly made, and a lion fight with Sandow was boldly advertised. The announcements sent a thrill through the cities for hundreds of miles around, and in order fully to be equipped for a performance which would be bound to attract thousands and thousands of people, I decided to rehearse my fight with the lion beforehand. Accordingly, preparations were made, and with much difficulty the lion was mittened and muzzled. It took several men with lassos and chains some hours to perform this operation, for not only had they to guard against the animal's overpowering strength, but they had to proceed cautiously in order not to injure him. A great cage, measuring 70 feet across, was brought round, and into it Colonel Bone, one of the most experienced of lion tamers, let the animal enter. Few people were present, but amongst them was my manager, that tall, slim, great little Ziegfeld, with a face white as snow. There is no doubt that M.R. Ziegfeld and the small company felt the position acutely, for, though personally I had confidence in myself, and confidence of victory is always half a battle won, yet those around were by no means sure of the issue, and there was some fear that my first fight with the lion might be my last. However, my purpose being fixed, I entered the cage, unarmed and stripped to the waist. The lion, with fury in his eyes, crouched down ready to spring. Having read a good deal of the methods of the lion, I was not unprepared for this form of attack. As he made his last strain for a tremendous leap, I stepped sharply to the side and he missed his mark. Turning quickly before he had time fully to recover, I caught him round 129 the throat with my left arm, and round the middle with my right. By this means, though his weight was 530 pounds, I lifted him as high as my shoulder, gave him a good hug to assure him that it was necessary to respect me, and tossed him onto the floor. Thus outdone at his first attempt, the lion roared with rage. Rushing fiercely towards me, he raised his huge paw to strike a heavy blow at my head. For the moment, feeling the swish of the lion's paw as it passed my face, I really thought that Colonel Bone's remark that he would knock my head off would prove true. Luckily I dodged my head just in time and got a good grip round the lion's body, with my chest touching his and his feet over my shoulders. Now came the tussle. The more I hugged him, the more he scratched and tore, and though his feet permitted, he tore through my tights and parts of my skin. But I had got him as in a vice, and his efforts to get away were fruitless. Choosing an opportune moment, I flung him off me, Colonel Bone and my manager shouting to me to come out of the cage. As I had done enough and the lion's rage was unbounded, I was determined, however, before I left, to try just one other feat. Moving away from the lion, I stood with my back towards him, thus inviting him to jump on me. I had not to wait many moments. He sprang right on my back. Throwing up my arms, I gripped his head, then caught him firmly by the neck, and in one motion shot him clean over my own head to the ground before me. Colonel Bone rushed into the cage, snapping 2 revolvers to keep the lion off, and I came out, my legs torn, my neck scratched, and with scratches all over my body. But I felt that I had mastered that lion, and that I should have little difficulty in mastering him again at the performance that was to be given next day in public. When the hour for the fight came, the huge tent, which held 20,000 people, was literally packed in every part. The 130 cage with the lion was outside, and whilst he was being mittened and muzzled, he became so furious that he broke 2 iron chains that bound him, and got loose. The people shrieked. The very men who a moment before had been boasting of their bravery, were the first to fly, and there was a general stampede. But the moment the lion saw my eyes fixed fearlessly and firmly on him, he seemed paralyzed. Colonel Bone came NP and pulled out his revolver, telling me not to take my eyes off him, as I had him in my power. Whilst we both remained motionless, the cage was brought near his head, and by a dexterous movement I had him over on his back, and once more he was a prisoner. The keepers tried again to mitten him, and after a great struggle they succeeded. Then came the scene in the arena. The lion appeared first, and as I entered, the whole place shook with cheers and applause. Through the whole of that vast assembly ran a thrill of great excitement, and photographers were there ready to take instantaneous pictures of the various positions of the fight with the lion. But no sooner did I enter the cage than the animal cowered down. He knew that I was his master and he refused to fight. Feeling that the audience would be sadly disappointed, one tried to goad him on, but nothing would move him. Most beasts are cowards at heart, and this lion, having met his match at the rehearsal, refused to budge. At last I caught hold of his tail and twisted it. This was the only thing that moved him. As he made a bound towards me, I dodged, swung round and picked him up, and then tossed him down. The fight lasted scarcely 2 minutes. The lion, recognizing that my strength was too much for him, would fight no more. Though I lifted him up and walked round the arena with him on my shoulders, he remained as firm as a rock and as quiet as a lamb. The fierce fight at the rehearsal had subdued his courage. He was clearly conquered. I was afraid that my audience would be disappointed with the comparative tameness of the proceedings, but, on the contrary, everyone 131 seemed thoroughly satisfied, and the lion fight with Sandow was long the talk of the day in San Francisco. 132-133 Chapter Capital X. Further incidents of the tour. At the end of my engagement in San Francisco, I organized my own company for a holiday tour in California. What a lovely country is that! A country of perpetual summer and blue sky, of bright flowers and delicious breezes. Well do I remember our arrival in Los Angeles. Thousands and thousands of people came to meet our coach, the children smothering us with roses as though it was some battle of flowers. But, of course, there were rough journeys in America as well as pleasant ones. On the way to Omaha, for example, we had an experience of the wilds. At the small villages at which the train stopped, it seemed to be the custom to adjourn for the 15 or 20 minutes to the gambling dens that adjoin the stations. Gambling has never had any attraction for me personally, but in Rome one does as Rome does, and so in America. Accordingly, we visited one of these gambling houses. There is no question about the gambling. You play with dice. Everything is conducted at lightning speed. and before you know where your high stakes have been lost or won, usually, it may be said, they are lost. In our case we started, in the few minutes at our disposal, by winning a good deal, then we lost, and we left that place with our pockets practically empty. I had lost $300, another lost $400, and a third $800. During the next part of the journey we heard that there was another gambling house at the station at which we should stop on our way. It was in connection, we understood, with it at which we had just lost our money, and no doubt the manager would be informed by telegram of the easy manner in which we had been duped, in order to be prepared for our arrival. But we were determined to be even with those gambling housekeepers. We agreed at the start not to risk more than $134, and if we won we would depart with our winnings before the luck, as in the last case, set in against us. For once expectations were realized. Precisely the same thing happened. At the beginning we had all the luck. We not only recovered what we had previously lost, but each of us had a few $100s to the good. Then of a sudden our luck began to turn. That was the signal. There was 6 or 7 minutes to spare before the train started, and the manager and his friends said, "You have lots of time, gentlemen, they will tell you when the train's ready." Much to their astonishment, however, we insisted on leaving, and as we walked out with our pockets fairly full the faces of those men fell visibly. I think on this occasion we had turned the tables successfully. Before, when we left at the previous stopping place, the partners of these fellows smiled considerably. They had had the advantage of us. Altogether this is a fairly even world. Someone may overreach us today, but tomorrow, if we are wary, we shall get our own again, perhaps with interest. 135-136 Chapter 11, My Dog Sultan. End of the tour. At this stage of the tour I will introduce, with the reader's permission, my dog Sultan, the holder of 17 first prizes. This dog, a handsome boarhound, standing about 34 inches high at the shoulders and weighing some 200 pounds, had been presented to me as a puppy by Prince Bismarck. Though I have never specially trained him, the dog has remarkable intelligence. My companion throughout my tour in America, he used to jump into the luggage van at every journey's end to find my trunks, and those that were not too heavy for him to lift he would bring out of the van. A similar performance would be repeated when we reached the hotel. Sultan would himself carry a good deal of the luggage upstairs, taking it up piece by piece, and disdaining the assistance of the niggers who would sometimes offer to give him help. Not unnaturally he became a great favorite wherever we went, and, though it was against the regulations, the hotel managers would allow us to have him in our rooms. He would never go out without carrying a satchel containing his chain and muzzle, a box of pills, 2 brushes, a toothbrush, a comb, and a few pieces of flannel. Wire were used for rubbing him down and keeping his coat in careful condition. He seemed to know perfectly each of these contents, and if one was ever missing he would not be satisfied until it was found or replaced. Sultan can carry me very easily. Once in America I sprained my foot. I happened to be staying at the time at about the only hotel in the country which is not furnished with elevators. My rooms were on the 2nd floor, and that faithful and devoted creature would carry me up and downstairs before and after each performance, for I was still able to fulfill my engagements despite the sprain. It is a peculiar thing about Sultan that, though he will not hurt 137 you, yet if you enter a room whilst he is in it alone he will never let you leave until someone has attended to you. As a thief catcher, he is, for this reason, unequaled. On one occasion, as you shall hear, during my American tour, he saved my watch, that watch which was presented to me by my friend the French Count. Whilst I'm at the theatre I usually leave my coat and vest hanging on the wall of my dressing room, Sultan being left in charge. One night we missed for more than an hour one of the stage assistants. When I returned to my dressing room I was unable for the moment to enter. Sultan, it appeared, was blocking the door. Pushing it open I found the missing assistant at the other end of the room in a state of some uneasiness. I asked him what he was doing, and he explained that he had come to see if he could offer me any assistance. Having entered the room the dog would not let him move, and altogether he made out such a piteous tale that I sent him off with $50. When, however, I came to look at my things I found that my watch, instead of being where I left it, in my vest pocket, was lying on the table, together with some money which had been taken from my pockets. It was then clear that the man's real object in entering my room was not that of assistance but of robbery. I called him back, verified my suspicions, and had him immediately discharged. For that night's work we treated Sultan to a special steak for his supper. This unfortunately was not the only adventure which I had with this watch of which I was so proud. My friend's gift seemed to be doomed. Whilst we were at Omaha there was a ball given in the city, and Mrs. Sandow and I were invited to be present. As we should be late in returning, I told my valet to give Sultan his walk and then to take the dog home with him for the night. We reached home about 2:30 in the morning, and being tired we went straight to bed. It may be explained that our bedroom stood behind the drawing room, from which it was entered. Beyond the bedroom was the bathroom, in which I hung my clothes, leaving my watch and chain in my vest pocket. 138 I felt that night, as I felt on the elbow, that something was going to happen. Owing to this feeling I took the precaution to lock the drawing room door. No one could enter the bedroom without coming through the drawing room first. We felt, therefore, reasonably secure. In addition to my watch and chain, there was Mrs. Sandow's jewelry, which she had worn to the ball, whilst amongst other special things I had 5 $20 pieces, which I had bought because of their rare dates. These gold pieces I left in my clothes in the bathroom. Mrs. Sandow's jewelry remained in a drawer in the bedroom. Through the night we slept without disturbance. In the morning the servant who came to look after our clothes noticed that my watch chain had been broken and that my watch was missing. The 5 $20 pieces were also gone, but Mrs. Sandow's jewelry was untouched. Questioned as to how she got into the room, the girl said that the door was open. Someone had evidently broken into our rooms whilst we slept and had worked so quietly that they had not disturbed us. A detective was called, and it was ascertained that shortly after we returned from the ball 2 well-dressed men entered the hotel and asked for rooms on the first floor. It was then between 2 and 3 o'clock. Before 5 o'clock they left. The detective remarked that about the tower 2 men answering the description that was given had been seen to enter a train, and he thought he would be able to succeed in tracing them. I told him that if he brought my watch back he should be well rewarded. When the rooms were examined it was found that the door had been opened by means of an instrument which was pushed through the keyhole to turn the key. The gas had been half turned on during the night, and no doubt they saw my watch chain shining in the uncertain light, and decided to take those 139 things that they could lay their hands on most easily without fear of waking us. It might have been supposed to be risky work to rob a strong man, but, on the other hand, it was found afterwards that the burglar was a desperate fellow, who had just completed 19 years penal servitude for shooting a man who was unfortunate enough to wake up whilst he was rifling his room. During the day the 2 men were arrested. 4 of the $20 pieces were found on them, but the watch was still missing. The men were taken before the police authorities, but on the ground that the case was not fully proved they were dismissed. After this decision, the detective came to me to ask what the watch is worth. £500 I told him, in actual money, but for me it had a priceless value, and not for £5,000 would I willingly part with it, seeing that it is worth so much. He said, I will try to get it for you if you will promise to give me £800. At this moment I realized the situation. At any rate I felt justified in believing that this so-called detective was in league with the burglars, who had themselves owned in court that they knew where the watch was, though they refused flatly to give the information. Feeling disgusted with a man who could thus play so false and mean a game, I took him by his neck and trousers and sent him flying through the door. From that day to this I have never seen anything of my watch. It is, no doubt, lost to me forever. If I had had my dog with me that night it would never have been stolen, for no burglar would have got past Sultan. However clever he might be at picking locks. Throughout my tour I offered medals to those of my pupils 140 who were able to show the highest developments under my system of physical training. Thousands of applications were received, and the amount of my correspondence was enormous. In the end I arranged a meeting, at which the pupils stripped for my personal examination, and there the awards were made. I received also several challenges during my tour. These challenges were frequently made after I had left a city, and as it came to be clear that those who made them merely sought advertisement by associating their names with mine, I deposited $10,000 with the New York Herald on the understanding that anyone who seriously meant business should also make a deposit as a guarantee of his good faith. If he duplicated my feats of strength the money would be his, but though this sum was deposited for about 9 months I never received an answer. At the end of my first tour in America I returned to England, engaged fresh talent for my company, and invented and practiced some new feats of strength, including that which I have entitled the Roman horse exercise, and that in which 2 people drive over me with a horse and chariot. Afterwards I paid a short return visit to America to fulfill certain engagements, and then came back again to London. 141-142 Chapters EI. My performance at the present time, it may be useful, as a record, to indicate briefly the nature of the salient features of my performance at the London Pavilion at the time of writing this book. To begin with, there is a tableau, arranged for the purpose of showing muscular repose, with all the muscles relaxed, muscular tension, with all the muscles as firm as steel, the abdominal muscles, the biceps, muscles of the upper arm, the triceps, muscles of the back of the arm, the deltoid, muscles of the shoulders, the trapezius muscles which raise the shoulders, the muscles of the back, the action and uses of different muscles, and the chest expansion, from 48 ins normal to 62 ins. The tableau curtains are withdrawn, and the scene changes to the arena. Resting with my neck on one chair and my heels on another, I hold 56-pound weights at arm's length and support 4 men simultaneously on my body. For the performance of this feat it may be mentioned that exceptionally strong neck and abdominal muscles are necessary. Taking a pack of ordinary playing cards, I tear them first in half and then in 4 parts. Next I repeat this performance with 2 packs, and finally with 3 packs, each pack containing the ordinary number of 52 cards. The feat of tearing in half one pack of cards was originally shown to me by the late Emperor of Russia. My reputation as an amateur had reached His Imperial Majesty, who paid me the honor of commanding my presence. During that interview His Majesty, as a test of his own manual strength, took a pack of cards and tore it, as I have said, in halves. He had never tried more than the 1 pack, but I have succeeded with 3. The torn cards being distributed each evening amongst the audience. 143. Another feat is performed lying prone on the ground. From this position I lift with one hand a Roman chariot, rising upright with it and afterwards lying down again. This feat brings the whole of the muscles into play. I also introduce my Roman horse exercise, sitting on a horse and so bending my back as to throw my head over the animal's tail. I raise at arm's length heavy weights from the ground. Next I pick up 2 men, one after the other, raising them over my head and seating them in the saddle. As a concluding feat, I support on my chest a bridge weighing 800 pounds. Over this bridge 2 persons drive a horse and chariot, making a total weight of about 3,200 pounds. It may be interesting, perhaps, to add that I have recently composed a musical march, entitled March des Athletes, as well as a waltz, Sandow and other pieces, which musicians have been kind enough to commend for their brightness and originality. 144-145 chapters e.i.e., my measurements. As a supplement to the previous chapter it may be stated here, in answer to many inquiries, that my own measurements, etc., at the present time are as follows: age 29 years, weight 14 stone 6 pounds, height 5 feet 9, 1/4 inches, neck 18 inches, chest 48 inches, chest expanded 62 inches, waist 30 inches, hips 42 inches, thigh 26 inches, knee 14 inches, calf 18 inches, ankle 8, 1/2 inches, upper arm 19, 1/2 inches, forearm 17 inches, wrist 7, 1/2 inches, 146. My strength, it may be added, is steadily increasing. If someone had told me 2 years ago that I should be able to perform the feats of strength that I now accomplish, I could not have believed it. I feel sure, moreover, that in the natural course of things, my strength will continue to increase. With careful training the bodily strength ought to increase steadily until the 45th year is reached. 147 Sandow School of Physicalculture, Street, Jamis Street, Piccadilly, London, W. 2 young men in ordinary health. I guarantee the following minimum development and 3 months training in lightweight exercises at neck, chest, upper arm, 1 inch 3 inches 2 inches, forearm, thigh, calf, 1 inch 1/2 inches 1 inch, waist, proportionate reduction. My physical culture, Vis: if these minimum developments are not attained, and in the majority of cases, no doubt, they will be much greater, I will return the pupil's fees for the 3 months course. Ladies have no need to develop their muscles to this extent, but in their case I promise that 3 months training at my school will give them increased health and strength, the size of the waist being also reduced to its natural proportions. Photographs of the pupils will be taken free of charge before and after training. Heavy weight lifting will be taught at my school by skilled instructors. Terms for the 3 months: 2 lessons weekly, TENGUINEAS, private lessons by arrangement. Eugen Sandow, Appendix I, lightweight exercises, as described in Eugen Sandow's earlier book, Sandow on Physical Training. Exercise 1, take a dumbbell in each hand, and come to the position of attention. as described in the opening sentences in the introduction to these exercises. Now, bend the knees slightly, and turn the inner side of the arms full to the front. In all exercises with the lightweight dumbbells, the knees must be bent, that the muscles of the leg may feel the strain of the movements of the upper limbs. Tighten the grip of the hands on the dumbbells, and make tense the muscles of the arms. 155. Then alternately flex or bend each arm at the elbow inwards and upwards, till the dumbbell is in line with the shoulder, back of the hand to the front, shoulders and elbows well drawn down, and the upper arms close to the sides. In lowering the dumbbells, straighten the arm to its full length, and repeat the alternate movements till the muscles ache. This exercise will develop chiefly the flexor biceps muscle, and the triceps extensor muscle, of the upper arm. Exercise 2. This exercise is the same movement as that in number 1, except that in the position of attention the backs of the hands and the forearms are to the front, and, when the latter are flexed upwards on the elbows, the knuckles of the hands are close to the shoulders. The alternate motion of bending and extending the arm at the elbow is to be performed rhythmically but vigorously, until the flexor and extensor muscles are made pliant and firm. The action will have a stimulating effect on the respiratory organs and the circulation of the blood. Exercise 3. Come to the position of attention, knees bent as before, and raise both arms outwards, at full length, in line with the shoulders. Now, turn the inner side of the forearms upwards, and alternately flex each inwards toward the head, until the dumbbell is immediately over the shoulder. In practicing this movement, maintain the arms rigidly in alignment with the shoulders. In other words, do not let them droop, and, in the straightening out movement, extend the arms fully, and put the muscles to the strain. The chief muscle that comes into exercise here, besides the biceps and triceps of the arm, is the deltoid, the great muscle that caps the shoulder. The effect of these alternate arm flexings is perhaps more beneficial than when both arms are flexed at the same time. Its chief 156 advantage is that it gives one arm a momentary alternate rest, and does not overstrain the heart by unduly forcing the circulation of the blood. Exercise 4. This exercise is the same as the last, the flexing movement of the forearms, however, being concurrent or simultaneous, and not alternate. See photo, number 4, and the caution to be observed, indicated in the closing sentence of the preceding exercise. In the alternate straightening or opening out movement, care should be taken to extend the arm fully, so that the extensor muscles may have fair play in counteracting the motion of the pulling up or flexing muscles. The exercise may be varied with advantage by curving the back slightly and bending the head downwards, at the same time bringing the flexed forearms inwards, underneath the upper arms and shoulders, and in this attitude ply the dumbbells outwards from the armpits to the full extension of each arm. The exercise will be found beneficial for the biceps, triceps, and deltoid. It will also stimulate the breathing and quicken the blood currents. To many perhaps the chief need as well as the great advantage of active muscular exercise. In the regular alternation of movements, such as are here and elsewhere in the series indicated, the young pupil should try to observe cadence, for a rhythmic movement tends to the automatic performance of the exercises, and so lessens the sense of fatigue, by relieving the brain of care in directing the muscle action. The habit, however, of thorough work must be first formed, and the mind fixed on this, before allowing the movements to become automatic. Exercise 5. From the attitude of attention, simultaneously raise both hands forwards and full to the front, curving them upwards until the 157-158 hands and dumbbells meet together in line with the mouth, elbows straight, head well back. The dumbbells in this exercise should be held perpendicularly, not horizontally. From the position attained, simultaneously throw both arms smartly back, well to the rear, and in line with the shoulders, chest well out. Return them quickly to the front again, and repeat the opening out movement as often and as vigorously as you can. This exercise is designed to open out the chest, and to loosen and give mobility to the pectoral muscles of the chest, and those in the region of the shoulders. It will be found to have a blood-relieving effect on the organs of the chest and head. 2 photographs, numbers 5 and B, illustrate the exercise. Exercise 6. From the position of attention, flex both forearms upwards from the elbow, palms inwards, as shown in the left arm of photograph number 6. Now, alternately raise each arm in a vertical line with the body, taking care to extend the arm over the head to its full length. The return movement should bring the elbow back close to the side and well to the rear. The head and trunk should be kept straight, the chest pressed forwards, and the arms kept well back. During this movement, the muscles brought into play in this exercise, in addition to the biceps, triceps, and deltoid, are those of the back and sides. chiefly the trapezius, latissimus dorsi, and teres major. Their action tends to open the chest and increase its mobility. Exercise 7. Take the position of attention, the hands and dumbbells resting lightly on the front of the thighs, knuckles outwards, knees bent, chest drawn inwards and outwards, back slightly curved. Raise the arms alternately, stretch to their full extent, forwards and upwards, till they are in line with the top of the head, lowering the one arm as the other is raised. Maintain this exercise as long and as briskly as possible, taking care to leave 159 the lungs and breathing action absolutely free and unimpeded. The movement tends to increase the mobility of the shoulder joints, and especially the toe strength in the anterior deltoid, the serratus magnus, latissimus dorsi and pectoral muscles. Exercise 8. This exercise will be found useful for loosening and making flexible the muscles of the wrist. From the position of attention, elevate both arms outwards until they are at right angles with the body, keeping them rigid and the muscles tense. Then, turn each hand and dumbbell simultaneously round as far as possible on the axis of the wrist, maintaining the movement till pliancy is imparted and the muscles are tight. The exercise may be supplemented by bending the hand backwards and forwards on the wrist. See that the arms do not droop from the shoulder alignment, and that they are not allowed to turn on the elbow joint. The movement is wholly executed by the wrists. Exercise 9. Take up the dumbbells by the sphere or bulb ends, grasping the bosses firmly in the hollow of the hands. Now, simultaneously raise the arms outwards, in line with the body, till they reach the level of the shoulders. In this position, rotate the right hand dumbbell from left to right, and the left hand dumbbell from right to left, by a circular motion of the wrist. Keep up the exercise till the muscles tire. The rotary movement is executed wholly by the wrist, and will be found to act beneficially on the numerous muscles of the forearm, and tend to give them mobility 160, 161, 162. Exercise 10. This is the same movement reversed, that is to say, the rotary movement of the right hand should be from right to left, and of the left hand from left to right. The continued exercise of this movement will give flexibility to the muscles of the forearm, and impart to them strength and endurance. Exercise 11. Place the dumbbells on the floor, where they should lie lengthwise along the outer side of each foot, the center of the bar on line with the toes. Seize them and rise to the position of attention, the head and body erect, the knees unbent, turn half round on the heels to the left, the toes being at an angle of 60 degrees. The body, which should turn on the hips, ought, as much as possible, to keep the front position. At the same time, bring the left forearm upwards to the waist, at right angles with the body. Take a good step forward with the right foot, and lunge out forcibly with the left arm in the same direction, as if striking a hard blow, and recover quickly. Bring back the advanced leg with the alternate recover. Repeat the movement until the muscles are well exercised, the right arm remaining tense by the side. In the return movement, bring the elbow well back, and press the chest well forward. The muscles brought into play in this exercise are the anterior deltoid, the biceps, the triceps, the serratus magnus, and the pectoralis major. When the body is turned on the hip, the lunging movement is beneficial to the abdominal muscles and assists circulation in that region. Exercise 12. This is the same movement reversed, bringing into play the right arm and left foot instead of the left arm and right foot. The half turn will consequently be to the right, and the left foot be advanced, to maintain the balance of the body. In these 163 movements circulation and respiration are materially benefited. The breath should be inhaled as the arms are drawn back, and exhaled when thrust forward. This and the previous exercise, it will be noted, vary from those which precede them, in this respect, that the pulling up muscles have hitherto been exercised, while the stretching out ones come now into play. Exercise 13. This exercise is practiced without the dumbbells. From the position of attention, the pupil will throw himself forward towards the floor, supporting the body, in a rigid position, on the unbent arms and the toes. Then, alternately lower the body, by slowly bending the elbows, until it reaches the prone position, and raise it, by straightening the arms, repeating the movement as many times as possible. Care should be taken that the body and lower limbs are kept rigidly straight and do not touch the floor, that the head is kept well up and the knees unbent. The exercise will be found excellent for strengthening all the muscles of the body, and for expanding the chest, as the strain, in the dipping and raising of the body, is severe. The movement should be indulged in mildly, until the biceps and triceps are pretty well hardened. When facility in the movement has been gained, the effort should be made to stretch the body, in the prone position, horizontally forwards as far as possible, nose more in front, at each performance, that the full benefit of the exercise may be obtained. Exercise 14. This exercise is the same as number 13, only rendered more difficult by the tension of the rubber straps which encircle the neck, and, by the resisting power, increase the development of the arms in the effort to raise the body from the prone position. The exercise will be more fully explained, with a description of the machine, to which the rubber straps are adjusted, in a later page. See front and profile views in photograph NUS 14 and B 164-165. Exercise 15. This exercise is designed to bring into play the rectus abdominis and other muscles of the abdomen, and has an important effect on the digestion. It should at first be performed without the dumbbells, then with dumbbells of increasing weight. Lie flat on the back on the floor, couch or bench, covered by rug, at full length, the arms closed by the sides, the feet pushed under the bureau, weighted or strapped to the floor, to give purchase to the body. Then alternately raise the body on the hip joints, from the prone to the sitting position, and slowly lower it again to the horizontal position, repeating the movements until the abdominal muscles feel the tiring effect of the exercise. After a time, when the pupil has accustomed himself to the strain of the movement, he may render it more difficult by taking a dumbbell in each hand, and, when in the prone position, raising the arms and stretching them back over the head, and then going through with the trunk raising and lowering movements, as above described. The exercise may also be performed without weighting or strapping the feet. A deep breath should be taken before raising the body, and exhaled in lowering it. In raising the body to the sitting position, it should also be bent forwards as far as possible towards the feet. With the dumbbells in the hands, it will be found advantageous also to cross the wrists over the head, and so bring the body upwards and forwards, the head locked, as it were, in the upward extended arms and moved in unison with them. For persons of full habit and having a tendency to be fat, the exercise will be found very beneficial, the increased blood circulation absorbing the fatty deposits, and the exercise itself being unfavorable to fatty formation. Exercise 16. This is a squatting exercise designed to develop the quadriceps extensor, or great extensor muscle of the thigh. Take a dumbbell in each hand, and come to the position of attention, the 166 body straight, the head erect, the chest thrust out, and the shoulders and hips held well back. By bending the knees, dip the body in a vertical line to the heels, keeping the back straight and the chin drawn in. Recover and repeat the movement until the muscles ache. This is a good exercise in poising the body and in giving suppleness to the knee joints. If the muscles of the leg and thigh have been well toned, their natural elasticity will render the movement easy. Take care not to let the body sway or incline forwards or backwards on the hips. After a pause, the exercise may be varied by raising the heels and throwing the weight of the body entirely on the toes, keeping rigidly the position of attention, and rising as high as possible in each motion without losing the balance. Continue the movement for some time, as it will be found of much benefit to the muscles of the calf. It will also give elasticity to those of the foot and ankle. Exercise 17. This exercise may be practiced either with or without dumbbells. From the position of attention, slowly bend the trunk catwards on the hip joint, alternately to the left and right, the hand or dumbbell slightly pressing the outer side of the thigh, and slipping down until it reaches the bend of the knee. When one hand touches the side of the knee, the other hand should be raised under the arm just above the serratus magnus muscle. The exercise will be good for the balancing muscles of the trunk as well as for the obliquus abdominis and other muscles that support and protect the sides of the abdomen. It will also give flexibility to the backbone, and increase the blood circulation, chiefly along the feeding veins of the stomach and the liver. 167, 168, 169. Appendix II. Eugen Sandow's most important bodybuilding lesson. This article originally appeared on evilciber.com. Eugen Sandow is often said to be the father of modern bodybuilding. It is true in more than one sense. He was likely the first to revitalize the marriage of physical strength with a visually pleasing shape, but he also introduced the shadier bits of the sport. From delicate child, when today you ask people who made bodybuilding and strength training popular, many will answer Arnold Schwarzenegger. Some may come up with Jack LaLanne, remembering his television show, but only a very few will mention Eugen Sandow. Yet Eugen was there long before them. Born in Germany in 1867 as Friedrich Wilhelm Müller, he was as ordinary a boy as any other, yet later became the probably first superstar of physical fitness, touring large cities, writing fitness books, appearing in short films and selling what we today would call fitness supplements. It all started with a visit to Italy, that he later recalled in his book Strength and How to Obtain It. As a child I was myself exceedingly delicate. More than once, indeed, my life was despaired of. Until I was in my 10th year, I scarcely knew what strength was. Then it happened that I saw it in bronze and stone. My father took me with him to Italy, and in the art galleries of Rome and Florence I was struck with admiration for the finely developed forms of the sculptured figures of the athletes of old. I remember asking my father if people were as well developed in these modern 170 times. He pointed out that they were not, and explained that these were the figures of men who lived when might was right, when men's own arms were their weapons, and often their lives depended upon their physical strength. Moreover, they knew nothing of the modern luxuries of civilization, and, besides their training and exercise, their muscles, in the ordinary course of daily life, were always being brought prominently into play. The memory of these muscular figures was ever present, and when we returned to my home in Königsberg I wanted to become strong like them. This may well have been what later set him apart from other strength artists of the time. Strongmen had already existed before he appeared, but they didn't think about a visually pleasing physique. For them only absolute strength counted. Eugen Sandow wanted to be strong and have an aesthetically perfect shape. To Rome and God he joined a gymnasium, started strength training, but found himself not quite successful. Yet instead of giving up, he sat down and applied some analytical thinking to the problem. He reasoned that to make your muscles grow, you not only need to work them, you also have to understand how they work, an idea I very much echo. Studying anatomy, he learned that he could give each individual muscle a movement and could arrange the exercises so that when some muscles are brought into play others are relaxed and left without strain. Basically he had come up with a training system most, if not all, professional bodybuilders of today still follow. The novel approach soon paid off. Contrary to other strength artists, with Eugen audiences more often than not were more 171 fascinated with the play of his muscles than his feats. While at 19 he was doing the same sideshows with the same chain-breaking and weightlifting stunts as other strongmen. By the age of 22 he already found himself on London stages and at 26 was under contract of influential Broadway impresario Florence Ziegfeld. But Eugen didn't only have a fantastic physique, he also knew how marketing worked. In 1894 he seized the chance to be among the first people ever filmed, realizing that those moving pictures were nearly as good as personally appearing in places to spread one's fame further. The entrepreneur at this point he had done everything to maximize his popularity. But why stop there? Eugen had probably already a while ago realized that the men in his audiences secretly admired him. After all, when he sold postcards with his pictures, a good number of the takers were male, and if men wanted to be like him, why not give them the possibility? This decision and the following developments practically set the career blueprint for every fitness celebrity after him. In 1894, he publishes his first book, Sandow on Physical Training. In 1898, he establishes Sandow's Magazine of Physical Culture, essentially the world's first bodybuilding magazine. In 1899, he designs a special set of dumbbells, followed by many other fitness appliances marketed through the Sandow Appliance Company. In 1901, he devises the first major bodybuilding contest, called the Great Competition. In 1904, his third book, Bodybuilding, is published. In 1911, he endorses plasmin, an egg white powder, as an essential food for working out. 172. In 1913, he takes the selling of workout supplements in his own hands, starting the Sandow Cocoa Company. Eugen's most important message: it would be unfair to say that Eugen was only business-minded. Despite trying to make as much money as he can out of his fame, he was also among the first proponents of physical education in schools. He also believed that employers should give workers time off for daily exercise. A 1911 advertisement for Plasmin, National Library of New Zealand. But there is no way around acknowledging that at some point he forgot or chose to neglect how humble his own beginnings were. Did he truly believe that people needed his special cocoa powders and dumbbells to become fit? We will never know. When he went untrained for the perfect physique he dreamed of, he had none of it to help him, nor did he seem to have needed it. Seeing it that way, Eugen Sandow not only made physical fitness popular and invented bodybuilding, he also gave us an important lesson about the latter, one that stands true to this day. Don't believe the hype and educate yourself, just like he did. For an excellent biography of Eugen Sandow, have a look at David Chapman's Sandow the Magnificent. Eugen Sandow and the Beginnings of Bodybuilding will be found to strengthen it. Begin, as you stand over the bath, by splashing the water 5 and 20 times over your head. Next, whilst still standing over the bath, Splash the water 15 times against the chest and 10 times against the heart, then jump into the bath, going right down under the water. In the summer you may remain in the water from 10 to 15 seconds, but in the winter let it be just a jump in and out again. The subsequent rub down with towels is popularly supposed to produce half the benefits that result from a cold bath. I have no hesitation in saying that this is a great mistake. Let me explain the reason. As you get out of the bath you rub down first one part of the body and then the other, and thus whilst the one part 15 is being warmed by the friction the other is getting cold. Many people who take cold baths in this way complain of touches of rheumatism, and the whole trouble arises, I believe, from different parts of the body being alternately warmed and chilled. In order to overcome the risk of this ill effect, my advice is this: do not spend any time over rubbing yourself down. If you do not like the idea of getting into your clothes wet, just take the water off the body as quickly as you possibly can with a dry towel, jump into your clothes, and let nature restore your circulation in her own way. You will get quite as warm by this method as by vigorously rubbing down, with the added advantage that the heat of the body will be more evenly distributed. If, owing to poor health or other exceptional causes, the circulation is not fully and promptly restored, walk briskly up and down the room. If you should still feel cold in any part of the body, probably the bath is not suited to your constitution, and in that case it is not advised. In 99 cases out of 100, however, the cold bath, taken as I have described, will have nothing but the most beneficial effects, and, if taken every morning throughout the year, it is the surest preventive that I know against catching cold. On the other hand, irregularity is liable to produce cold. In short, having once begun the cold bath, make a rule, summer and winter, never to leave it off. Personally, I find the very best form of the cold bath is to get into your clothes after it without drying the body at all. For the first moment or two the sensation may not be perfectly agreeable, but afterwards you feel better and warmer for adopting this method. The damp is carried away through the clothes and no particle of wet is left. For pupils who have not the convenience of a bathroom, a cold sponging down may be recommended as a substitute. In this case let 2 towels be taken and soaked with water. Rub the 16 front of the body down with one, and the back with the other. This method prevents the towel from absorbing the heat from the body, and the cold sponging is thus distributed evenly over its surface. Afterwards dry the body quickly as before, letting no time be lost in getting into your clothes. 17 Chapter III, the Tables of Ages. From the following tables pupils of all ages will be able to see at a glance how many times the movements of each exercise illustrated by the anatomical chart should be practiced daily. In the first place, parents who desire to see their little ones grow into well-developed men and women may be advised to buy their babies light wooden dumbbells as playthings. The exercises themselves, of course, should not be attempted until the child has reached the age of 6 or 7. From that age onwards be guided in the amount of daily practice by the tables. In order that every reader may understand the exercises easily, the leading muscles only are mentioned on the chart. Pupils should guard against overexertion, and, above all things, do not exercise violently. Keep time with each movement, and it will be found convenient to let each arm, not both arms, move once in a second. Thus, for example, the time of 10 movements with each arm of the first exercise would be 20 seconds. As a general rule, this time will be found to give just the exercise that is needed. Faster movements are not recommended for either young or old. Be careful also not to jerk the movements. Exercise easily and gracefully. 18 Table 1. For children of both sexes, between the ages of 7 and 10, using 1-pound dumbbells only. No of exercise. See chart. No of movements with each arm. Increase of movements, not to exceed 120. For children of both sexes, between the ages of 10 and 12, using 2-pound dumbbells only. No of exercise. See chart. No of movements with each arm. For children of both sexes, between the ages of 12 and 15, using 3-pound dumbbells only. No of exercise. No of movements. Increase of movements. For girls, between the ages of 15 and 17, using 3-pound dumbbells only. No of exercise. No of movements. For boys, between the ages of 15 and 17, using at first 4-pound dumbbells. At this age, boys, when they have increased the number of movements of the first exercise from 30 to 120, and all others in proportion, are recommended to go through the course again with 6-pound dumbbells. No of exercise. No of movements. Table 6. For girls, of 17 years of age and upwards, using 4-pound dumbbells only. No of exercise. No of movements. Increase of movements. For youths, of 17 years of age and upwards, using at first 5-pound dumbbells, as recommended in Table 5, pupils when they have increased the number of movements of the first exercise from 30 to 120, and all others in proportion, are recommended to go through the course again and again, adding 2 pounds to the weight of the dumbbells at the beginning of each fresh course. On the completion of the 7th and 8th course, with the dumbbells weighing 20 pounds, I guarantee that my pupils will be as muscular as I am. Chapter IV, Prizes for Pupils. In order to encourage those who intend to adopt my system of training, I offer for every down 2 sets of first, second and third prizes, in the form of cups and medals, to the pupils who can show in the one case the best development, and in the other the greatest strength. It will be possible, of course, for one pupil to win a prize in each division. Pupils who wish to compete for these prizes should send me, without delay, their present measurements, duly witnessed by 2 persons, one medical man preferred, together with their age, weight, height, and portrait, stripped to the waist. These measurements should be written legibly on one side of a sheet of paper, in order to facilitate their entry in my book of pupils' records. At the completion of their course of training, pupils will be required to fill up and address to me the subjoined table of measurements, together with a second portrait showing their development. It is important that the measurements should be again witnessed by at least 2 persons living in the same town as the pupil. There is no limit of time to the competitions. It is left to the discretion of pupils to return the table, which they will find on the next page when they consider their development complete. Competitors may be guided as to the developments that are required by the letters from pupils that are published in subsequent pages. 29 Chapter V, Sandow's Chart of Measurements. The figure will show pupils how to take Eugen Sandow strength and how to obtain it. Preface to this electronic edition. Various versions of this book float around on the internet, but most, if not all, suffer severely from electronic transfer, making whole passages illegible, missing pictures and tables, or simply consisting of scanned pages that can't be read on e-readers. I therefore took the time to acquire a copy of the book, scan the text, correct it by hand, use images from the electronic edition found at top and library.org where needed, and include the tables and pictures in the appropriate places. In other words, I generally tried to keep everything as true to the original form as possible. One caveat still exists. Like many of the physical editions of Strength and How to Obtain It currently being for sale, mine too missed the anatomical chart Sandow talks about, and I also wasn't able to find it elsewhere. But without it the book is useless as a training guide. However, Sandow used 17-18 exercises that pretty much stayed the same over his several books, and to still give the reader of this e-edition a way of using it for some possible practical application as well. I therefore adapted the descriptions of the exercises from his earlier book, Sandow on Physical Training. You can find them in Appendix I. If someone is able to enlighten me about exercise number 18 or has the actual anatomical chart and is willing to let me have a look, I would be very grateful. Should you choose to adapt his style of training, keep in mind that not everything he assumes about how training works is necessarily how it should still be done. After all, more than 100 years have passed since the book was first published, and we did make some advantages in researching strength training in that regard. And when I said above that I tried to stay as true as possible to the original book, this also includes some forms of spelling, dumbbell instead of dumbbell, for example, but especially that I didn't alter any of the expressed worldviews that we today might find unacceptable. It too is questionable if everything Sandow reports on in the second part of the book took place as described. Likely some Victorian exaggeration was freely incorporated here. In Appendix I included a short article about Sandow I wrote for my site, containing some biographical background about him that you may find interesting. For now I will be finishing my work on this, as I find myself increasingly tempted to write English as used in the 19th century. Enjoy. E.C. of Evilsibacom, December 2012. Introduction. Hundreds of letters reach me daily, asking can I become strong? Yes, you can all become strong if you have the will and use it in the right direction. But, in the first place, you must learn to exercise your mind. This first of all lessons in physical training is of the utmost importance, for on it the whole of my system depends. If physical exercise alone and unaided could achieve the desired end, then would everyone who, like the breaker of stones, has to use his muscles to earn his daily bread, become, in a popular acceptation of the term, a strong man. The breaker of stones, however, never uses his mind. He has to get through a given amount of work, and his method is purely mechanical. though he may use his muscles in hard work every day of the year, it is unlikely that his strength will ever materially increase. Exercise, indeed, without using the mind in conjunction with it, is of no use. It is the brain which develops the muscles. Physical exercise must be commenced by degrees, first bringing into play one muscle, then two, then three, and so on, being careful all the time to agreeable sensations I have ever had. Frequently pupils ask me how long it should take them to get strong. The answer again depends on themselves, not only on their physical constitution, but also on the amount of willpower they put into their exercises. As I have said already, it is the brain that develops the muscles. Brain will do as much as dumbbells, even more. For example, when you are sitting down reading, practice contracting your muscles. Do this every time you are sitting down leisurely, and by contracting them harder and harder each time, you will find that it will have the same effect as the use of dumbbells or any more vigorous form of exercise. For the beginner, the most difficult part of my system is so fully to concentrate his mind on his muscles as to get them absolutely under control. It will be found, however, that this control comes by degrees. The brain sends a message to the muscles, the nerves receive it and pass it on to them. With regard to the willpower that is exerted, it should be remembered that whilst the effect of weightlifting is to contract the muscles, the same effect is produced by merely contracting the muscles without lifting the weight. It will be noticed that throughout my exercises I make a point of alternate movements. By this means one arm, or, as the case may be, one set of muscles, is given a momentary rest whilst the other is in motion, and thus freer circulation is gained than by performing the movement simultaneously. Another question which pupils are constantly asking me is whether it is right for them to perspire after the exercises. The 13 answer to this question is that it depends on the constitution of the pupil. If you perspire, it does you good. If you do not, it shows that your condition is sound already. Of course, it will be understood that I am answering in this, as in other questions, for general cases. There are always exceptions. Again, what, it is asked, are the general benefits of the Sandow system of physical training? The benefits are not, of course, confined to the visible muscular development. The inner organs of the body also share them. The liver and kidneys are kept in good order, the heart and nerves are strengthened, the brain and energy are braced up. The body, in fact, like a child, wants to be educated, and only through a series of exercises can this education be given. By its aid the whole body is developed, and pupils who have followed my system testify not only to their increased muscular strength but to their general health. They feel, indeed, as strong as they look. 14 Chapter II, The Secret of the Cold Bath. If the pupil is able to exercise the first thing every morning, let me advise him, whilst the body is hot with a physical performance, to take a cold bath. It does not matter how much he may be perspiring, the cold bath will prove exceedingly beneficial. He must be careful, however, not to take his bath if he is out of breath. The exercises will, no doubt, quicken the heart's action, but in from 3 to 5 minutes after the series is completed the heart should be beating normally again. For persons who suffer from weak heart I would not advise a cold bath. As a general rule there is no need to ask the question, is my heart weak? For if it is weak you should know it beyond a doubt. After every little exertion, though the assertion may appear paradoxical, you will feel it beating in your head. In advising cold baths I speak, of course, for persons in the enjoyment of ordinary health. The bath should be begun in the summer and continued every morning throughout the year. In the winter, if the room is cold, light the gas and close the door. If your hair is not injuriously affected by cold water, and in many cases, I believe, cold water put the mind into every movement, let me strongly advise every student to study well the anatomical chart which is published with this book. By its aid you will be able not only to receive a useful lesson in anatomy, but you will also be able to see at a glance the exercise by which each muscle may be developed. Part I, My System of Physical Culture 10 Strength and How to Obtain It. Chapter I, How to Exercise. In commencing the system of exercises, described and illustrated by the anatomical chart, there are certain questions which every student naturally asks himself. Probably the very first of these questions is, what part of the day ought I to devote to these exercises? The answer to this question must depend on the pupil himself, on his leisure and on his inclination. Some persons find the early morning the best and most convenient time, others prefer the afternoon, and a third class, again, find that they feel best and have the most leisure at night. I do not, therefore, lay down a hard and fast rule of time. The golden rule is to select such part of the day as suits you best. always avoiding exercise immediately after meals. If possible, let 2 hours elapse between a meal and exercise. Moreover, do not exercise just before going to bed if you find it has a tendency to keep you awake. Many of my pupils find that they sleep much better after exercise, but there are some upon whom it has a reverse effect. 11. If all hours are equally convenient to the pupil, the very best time for training under my system is the early morning. Stripped to the waist, in the privacy of his own room, the pupil will find that he can go through the whole course of exercises in from 20 minutes to half an hour. It is desirable to exercise before a looking glass, for you can thus follow the movements of the various muscles, and to see the muscles at work, and to mark their steady development, is itself a help and a pleasure. If the pupil is at all weak in the legs, he may, in performing the exercises, bend the knees slightly, or he may bend them one day and stand erect another. If possible, it is better of course to stand erect. In any case, he must be able to stand erect before completing the course. What I wish to impress on delicate pupils is the desirability of progress by degrees. Many men before beginning my system of physical training have been so weak that doctors have thought little of the prospect of saving their lives, yet today they are amongst the strongest. They have progressed gradually, always being careful not to undertake too much, and thus adapting the exercises to their own individual requirements. It may be mentioned also that the old as well as the young may derive great benefits from my system, though all who are over the age of 50 should moderate the exercises on the lines suggested in the table of ages for pupils between 15 and 17. My exercises will also be found of considerable benefit to persons who suffer from obesity. Pupils must not be discouraged because, after the first few days' training, they may feel stiff. It sometimes happens that a young man or woman, or perhaps a middle-aged one, sets out on the course of training with the greatest enthusiasm. After the first 2 or 3 days the enthusiasm perhaps wears off, then comes a period of stiffness, and the pupil is inclined to think that he cannot be bothered to proceed with the course. To such 12 pupils, I would say, in all earnestness, don't be overcome by apparent difficulties. If you wish to succeed, go forward, never draw back. This stiffness, moreover, becomes a very pleasant feeling. You soon grow to like it. Personally, indeed, it might be said that it is one of the most